Hey everybody, this is Dave here at Blue Bears Games. Today's video is going to be a little different. Today we're going to be doing an offshoot of another series. We're going to be doing a Blues Brews. However, today we're going to try something I mentioned a couple weeks ago I was going to do on the Facebook page. I'm going to be doing what's called Blues Budget Brews. It is commander decks that are $40 or less. The difference between the decks that I make for myself and these decks, aside from them being a little bit budget, these are actually for sale. What I'm doing is I'm making decks for the cons that I do, and I'm putting them up for sale there. But I'm also going to add to that I'm going to put them up on various other places for sale, such as like commander groups on Facebook, on my own personal page on Facebook as well, and anywhere else that I can go to sell them. So these are pretty much $40 decks, almost $40. Some of them will be a little more, some will be a little less. I'll go ahead and go over the decks with you. This will be the first one I do of many. This one will be, each one will have a link in the description of the video to a page that gives you a breakdown of what each card does specifically by just hovering over them on a computer or clicking on them on a mobile phone, and you'll be able to see them outside of the video as well if you just want a list of the deck. So I'm going to go ahead and describe the strategies for each deck. This one's going to be the first one, and then if you guys are interested, or girls, or whatever you are, go ahead and you can send me a message on the Facebook page. You can contact me through the comments section on this video, or you can send me an email. I will give that email out directly at the end of the video. So let's go ahead and go over the deck that I have for you today. I finished building this the other day, and it's a pretty good one. This one is Marwyn the... Ooh, slippery cards. It's Marwyn the Nurturer, and this is Elf Tribal with a small twist. It's actually a version of my Eldrazi deck that I did for the Budget Brews before, only this is Commander style. So, I'll tell you what Marwyn does and we'll go from there. So, Marwyn the Nurturer is a 1/1 elf. She is 1 green, 2 generic for an elf druid that whenever another elf enters the battlefield under your control, you put a +1/+1 counter on her, and she taps to add an amount of green equal to Marwyn's power. So if you have 3 +1/+1 counters on her, she's a 4/4, she'll tap to add 4 green. So as you can see, this is a ramp style. It's going to be intensive mana, so you can go ahead and cast some of the Eldrazi. I will say that all the decks that I'm making are specifically built to be upgradable. These are not finished, these are not optimized, these are for beginners or for somebody looking for a deck that they want to go ahead and make changes to, and there's room for that improvement. Okay? So again, it's budget, but it's upgradable. They're not horrible. They actually can work if you do it right. So the first one I start with is Marwyn. So I'll go ahead and go through the rest of it. So in the next part, I will go over the mana base. It's a mono green deck, so there's not a lot of options for cheaper, and I mean, a guy's cradle's $400 or $500, so obviously that's not going to be in here. And yes, you can go ahead and get this deck and upgrade it with one of those, but I wouldn't suggest it at the beginning. So with mono green, we only had a couple options for some of the decks that weren't basic lands. So I go with Slippery Karst, only because it cycles. So if you have enough land, you have enough mana on the board, you can go ahead and just cycle away to draw a card. And Tranquil Thicket, same thing, so that one cycles as well. Every budget deck I do has the faux fetches, as I call them. Evolving Wilds, which sacrifices, you tap and sacrifice it to search your library for a basic land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. And the same thing with Terramorphic Expanse. This is to thin your deck out while you're playing. And again, we're monocolor or, even at dual color, these are good enough at budget level. Blighted Woodland, I believe that for every green deck I make that's budget, I will try to get one of these in there. It taps to add a colorless, but for 1 green and 3 generic mana, tapping and sacrificing it, you can search your library for up to 2 basic lands and put them onto the battlefield tapped. Again, it's more thinning out your deck of bad draws. I don't like Temple of the False God in most decks. For a deck, specifically on the budget side, when I do green, my ramp is in the green decks going to mostly be fetching things and getting them onto the battlefield. So Temple of the False God actually works here because I'll try to get the 5 lands on the battlefield as quickly as possible. So it taps to add 2 colors, and you can only activate that ability if you control 5 or more lands. So the hope is that it'll work in this deck. Rogue's Passage is in this specific version of the deck for a couple reasons. Commander damage is a good way to go ahead and win this game for this deck. It has enough elves that it'll make Marwyn, if she can stay on the board long enough, it'll make her huge, and you can get some good commander damage in. It's also Eldrazi, so they hit pretty hard, and if you can make them unblockable, it's going to be a good day for you. So I put that in there. And then the rest of it's filled out with farce, and I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head. I did put it on MTG Goldfish. Again, you can click the link in the description, and it'll give you the amount of farce that are in there. The next section will be the ramp that I chose for this specific deck. This is a ramp of growth. It's 2 to cast, and it basically reads, if you don't know what it does, is to search your library for a basic land, put it into the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle your library. So it's going to go get a forest in this deck. Untamed Wilds is 1 green, 2 generic, and search your library for any 1 basic land and put it directly into play. So basically go search your library for a basic land, put it into play, and then shuffle your library afterwards. This one doesn't make it come into play tapped. Grow from the Ashes is, again, 1 green, 2 generic, with a kicker of 2. You can search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. But if the spell was kicked, instead search your library for 2 basic lands and put them on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So again, it doesn't come into play tapped. Journey of Discovery, 1 green, 2 generic, again for a sorcery. You can choose between 2 options, or entwine it for 1 green, 2 generic, which means that you can cast both halves of the card. So it's search your library for up to 2 basic land cards, reveal them, put them into your hand, then shuffle your library, or you may play up to 2 additional lands this turn. So you can go search for 2 and then put them into play if you entwine it. Beneath the Sands, for, again, I kind of stayed in a certain range because of the pricing. To keep the price down, I had to go with the more higher cost mana ramping. So as far as the mana cost, so this one is 1 green and 2 generic as well. Search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library. Or if for some reason you have enough mana generation on the board, you can cycle it to draw a card. Explosive Vegetation is 1 green, 3 generic. You can search your library for up to 2 basic lands and put them onto the battlefield tapped and shuffle your library. So again, more and more of thinning your deck out. Seek the Horizon, again, it's 1 green, 3 generic. You can search your library for up to 3 basic lands, reveal them, put them into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So this is the mana ramping. This one's more of a mana fixer than it is a mana ramp, but there are ways to go ahead and get those lands into play as well. So those are the things I chose because we're trying to be in budget, and mana rocks are kind of expensive. It brings the price up, and I'm trying to keep it in a specific range. So I went ahead and I used green so that I could take the cheaper route by getting mana ramp, and it actually, everybody knows that the green mana ramp is better than mana rocks because you can get the land directly in play, all that stuff. I mean, in conjunction they work together, but monetarily they're just more expensive, so I went with that instead. So, on to the elves. These are the creatures. Now, not every creature in this deck is going to be an elf. If it's not an elf, it certainly helps do what these guys want to do. So, we went with Elvish Mystic, which is basically a Llanowar Werewolf, but with a different name because we want redundancy. So, I also added a Llanowar Werewolf. So, they're both 1 to cast, 1/1s to tap to add a green. Wildwood Tracker is a 1 to cast, 1/1 elf warrior. Whenever Wildwood Tracker attacks or blocks, if you control another non-human creature, it gets +1/+1 until end of turn, and in this deck you don't have anything but non-humans. Maybe 1 human, maybe. Spire Tracer, 1 to cast 1/1 Elf Scout. Can't be blocked except by a creature with flying or reach, so it's a little bit of evasion. And Narnum Renegade, 1 to cast 1/2 with Death Touch, so a little bit of help there. And it has Revolt, which says when it enters the battlefield, it comes in with a +1/+1 counter. If a permanent you control left the battlefield this turn, and this works very well in conjunction with, say, you have Evolving Wilds or a Terramorphic Expanse in play, and you want to sacrifice them to go get a land, and he comes into play with a +1/+1 counter. Azuri Archers is a 1 to cast 1/2 as well. It's an Elf Archer. It has Reach, and when it blocks a creature with flying, Azuri Archers gets +3/+0 until end of turn, so it becomes a 4/2 if it's blocking a flying creature. Wildborn Preserver is a 1 green, 1 generic 2/2 Elf Archer. It has Flash, Reach, and whenever another non-human creature enters the battlefield under your control, you may pay X. When you do, put X +1/+1 counters on it, so you can make him grow really fast too with all the mana you're going to have. Remember, you're casting 1 to cast 1/1 elves that actually tap for mana, so you could just cast a 1 to cast 1/1 and then just put a lot of counters on them. And that's one of the sub-themes besides the low monetary value Eldrazi. A lot of +1/+1 counters are going to be thrown around in this deck. Next up is Woodland Champion. It's 1 green, 1 generic for a 2/2 Elf Scout. Whenever 1 or more tokens enters the battlefield under control, put that many +1/+1 counters on Woodland Champion. Now, there isn't a lot of token generation here. He's in here because it's 2 cast 2/2 with an ability. There is the possibility of making a couple of tokens, and you can play on that theme a little bit more later. If you want to go ahead and upgrade this deck, there's a couple of elves that actually tap to create an elf token. I don't have them, or I would have put it in here, so you can go ahead and either replace that with something that may fit better if you do decide you want to upgrade this deck. But for now, it's going to stay in there as I needed something that does something with an option to play later. Up next, Thornweld Archer, 2 to cast 2/1 with Reach and Death Touch. It's just utility. It's great. It's got 2 abilities, and it's cheap to cast, and it's an elf, so it went in there. Silhana Wayfinder is 2 to cast for a 2/1 Elf Scout. When it enters the battlefield, look at the top 4 cards of your library, and you may reveal a creature or land from among them, and put it on top of your library, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So this is for... essentially, it's kind of like scrying, so you get to choose out of 4 cards what you want your next draw to be. And there are ways to draw. Now, we all know that green is the king of ramp, but it's not very good at card draw. There are some ways to draw cards in here, and you can change that later. There are artifacts out there that can do it. I just don't have any that I could put in here that would keep the cost down. Up next, Pollenbright Druid. 2 to cast 1/1 Elf Druid. When Pollenbright Druid enters the battlefield, you can choose the following. Either put a +1/+1 counter on target creature, or proliferate. And proliferate means that you can add an additional counter of each kind to anything that has one on there. And with the other +1/+1 counters, proliferate may actually be the better choice on some cases, or it may not. Most likely it will be, because you'll have all these other +1/+1 counters on things. Paradise Druid is a 2 to cast 2/1. She has hexproof as long as she is untapped, and she taps to add 1 mana of any color. So more ramp, and she has a little bit of protection. Kujar Seed Sculptor, 2 to cast for a 1/2. When it enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It doesn't have to be Kujar, it could be any of the creatures that are on the battlefield. It could be your commander. Heart Warden, 2 to cast for a 1/1. Taps to add 1 green mana to your mana pool, so taps to add a green. And you can pay 2 and sacrifice him to draw a card. So a little bit of draw. The card draw from this deck is going to come a lot from the creatures. Greenwood Sentinel, 2 to cast 2/2 with Vigilance. Just utility. It's a bear that has Vigilance. Elvish Visionary is a 2 to cast 1/1 that when it enters the battlefield you can draw a card. Dwynen Elite is 2 to cast 2/2. When it enters the battlefield, if you control another elf, put a 1/1 green elf warrior token onto the battlefield. So create a 1/1 green elf warrior token. Silkweaver Elite is 1 green and 2 generic for a 2/2 elf archer. Has reach and revolt. The Revolt is when it enters the battlefield. If a permanent you controlled left the battlefield this turn, you can draw a card. So again, more ways that you can draw cards. Rosethorn Acolyte is a 1 green, 2 generic, 2/3 elf druid, has adventure. The adventure is pay a green and add 1 mana of any color, or when it's cast as a creature, it has tap to add 1 mana of any color. So he's the Rosethorn's in here for 2 reasons. It's a little bit of ramp. It's not the same style of ramp as, say, a Rampant Growth. It adds the color that you need, but for this deck it's only going to be green, so it's kind of an even wash. Sometimes you may need to be able to use the green, who knows, but it's because it's a 3 to cast 2/3, and it can tap to add, mana, so it helps the ramp. Reclamation Sage is more for utility. It's 3 to cast 2/1. When it enters the battlefield, you may destroy an artifact or enchantment, so it helps keep some of the bad stuff off the board on your opponent. One of the rares is Elvish Archdruid, 2 green and 1 generic for a 2/2. It's a Lord, so other elves you control get +1/+1, and then you can tap the Archdruid to add a green to your mana pool for each elf you control. So it's a little bit of ramp along with it. Llanowar Tribe is 3 green for a 3/3 that taps to add 3 green. And that's in there because it's a 3 to cast 3/3, and then the bonus is it taps to add 3 green. Evolution Stage is 1 green, 2 generic for a 3/2. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under control, you can proliferate, so you can keep adding +1/+1 counters to things as you go. Wild Wanderer, 1 green, 3 generic for a 3/2 elf druid. When it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffle your library, so more ways to get land out of your deck and onto the battlefield. Shaman of Spring is the, basically an Elvish Visionary, but doubled. It's 1 green, 3 generic for a 2/2 instead of a 1/1, and when it enters the battlefield, draw a card. Oakham Adversary, 1 green, 3 generic for a 2/3. The spell costs 2 less to cast if an opponent controls a green permanent. It has Death Touch, and then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. The reason why this card works in this deck is twofold. For one, a lot of people play green now, specifically when they're beginning, but a lot more people play green because they've buffed up the color. So you're going to have an opponent who has it, so it's going to only cost 2 to cast for a 2/3, so that's good. It has Death Touch. Most people don't like to block with things that have Death Touch. It has a nice defense on it so that it may survive if somebody chump blocks it anyway. And if they don't block it, you get a card out of it. So it works in a lot of ways. Golgari Readers, 4 for a 0/0 haste. It has Undergrowth, which means it enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter on it for each creature card in your graveyard. And why that's good as a 0/0 is because I have a theme going here that's a small theme for +1/+1 counters, so at least its power and toughness will be in counters, so you can add to that. Ivy Lane Denizen is one of my favorite green elves. Actually, it does so much. It's 4 for a 2/3. Whenever another green creature, doesn't have to be any specific kind, it just has to be a green creature, enters the battlefield under your control, put a +1/+1 counter on any creature that you control. Or actually, even better, on target creature. And you won't normally put counters on your opponent's creatures. However, if they for some reason are playing illusions that die when they're targeted, it's a good way to kill them too. Just a little extra. The one of the, I think, 2 or possibly 3 non-elves in the deck. I said they have to help the deck if they're not an elf. This is a 4 to cast 2/2. It's a human, so it's the one that won't help on, a non-human. Other green creatures you control get +1/+1. It's in here as a Lord. I wanted a way to buff up the creatures, but a lot of elf lords that buff up your creatures are quite pricey, except for like 1 or 2. So I went ahead and put this in there to take its place. It has an additional ability of, for a green and tap it, another target green creature you control gains trample until the turn. Neither one of these abilities is bad to put, even if it's not an elf. Masked Admirers, 2 green, 2 generic for a 3/2. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and the best part about this card is whenever you cast a creature spell, which there's plenty of them in here, you may pay 2 green, and if you do, return Masked Admirers from your graveyard to your hand. It's a little bit of recursion, you can keep doing it. Telja Had Fallen, 2 green, 2 generic. It's a 3/1 that has protection from artifacts, meaning that it can't be targeted, blocked by anything that's an artifact creature. It can't take damage from anything that's an artifact. And it has Infect. Infect is that this creature deals damage to creatures in the form of -1/-1 counters. There's that proliferate. You know, you can proliferate if this thing has hit something that's big or block something that's big and give it -1/-1 counters, and you can keep them going by using proliferate. Or it deals damage to a player in the form of poison counters. 10 poison counters equals a game lost for a player, so keep that in mind, and it has a good power to go along with that in case, you know, you have a way to make it unblockable. Beast Whisperer is probably the most expensive card in the deck as far as monetary value, but it was absolutely necessary. It's helping you draw cards. It's 2 green, 2 generic for a 2/3, and whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. It's to help keep that train going. One of the other non-elf creatures in the deck, but it adds to the theme of +1/+1 counters, is Renata, the Called to the Hunt. 2 green, 2 generic for a star 3. Her power is equal to your devotion to green, and there's plenty of green in here. And each other creature you control enters the battlefield with an additional +1/+1 counter. Even if it doesn't enter the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter, it puts one on them. Okay, so keep that in mind. Lyssalana Huntmaster, one of the better elves that you could have in this deck. I said that there was a +1/+1 counter theme. There's a very, very minute sub-theme of putting counters in. There are other ways to do it, but this is one of the ways. 2 green, 2 generic for a 3/3. Whenever you play an elf spell, it doesn't have to be successful, by the way. It's whenever you cast it. So if it gets countered, you still get this. You may put a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token into play. So create a 1/1 green elf warrior token. Pima Outrider, 2 green, 2 generic for a 3/3 trampler with Fabricate. Fabricate says when this creature enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on it, or create a 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature token. So again, more +1/+1 counters. So she's essentially, he or she, this one's a he, I believe, is a 4 to cast 4/4, but one of it's a +1/+1 counter that you can proliferate. Cultivator of Blades, 2 green, 3 generic for a 1/1. It has Fabricate 2, so it can enter the battlefield with 2 +1/+1 counters or create 2 1/1 colorless servo artifact creature tokens. Whenever Cultivator of Blade attacks, you may have attacking creatures get +X/+X until end of turn, where X is Cultivator of Blade's power. So if you put the counters on it, which I would assure you you will, it comes into play as a 3/3, and when it attacks, all of your creatures get +X/+X, so it's +3. Elven Riders, 1 green, 3 generic for a 3/3. It cannot be blocked except by walls or creatures with flying, so it's the reverse reach, so evasion. And then the Eldrazi, so the other non-elves in the deck, but remember these are non-humans as well, so they work with the other card. I had to go as budget as possible. There's a good amount of these in there. Different ones that at least are passable to be an Eldrazi. If you want to purchase this deck and go ahead and upgrade it with the Titans, you can go ahead and do so. This deck is capable of doing that. So up first is Bane of Balaged. It's 7 to cast for a 7/5, and whenever it attacks, defending player exiles 2 permanents he or she controls. It's almost basically Annihilator, but it's not. Ulamog's Crusher, 8 to cast for an 8/8 with Annihilator 2, and Annihilator, which I just said, is whenever this creature attacks, defending player sacrifices 2 permanents. And I believe this one, yeah, it must attack each turn of Fable, but you're not going to not attack with it. Breaker of Armies is an 8 to cast 10/8, and all creatures able to block Breaker of Armies must do so. So, in other words, it's going to kill a lot of creatures. Eldrazi Devastator, 8 to cast for an 8/9 and trample. And Artisan of Kozilek, 9 to cast for a 10/9. When you cast Artisan of Kozilek, you may return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with Annihilator 2. Hand of Emrakul, 9 to cast for a 7/7. You may sacrifice 4 Eldrazi spawn rather than pay its mana cost. We don't have any Eldrazi spawn going on here with Annihilator 1, and it's a 7/7. And Mockery of Nature, 9 to cast for a 6/5 with Emerge. Emerge says you may cast a spell by sacrificing a creature and paying the Emerge cost reduced by that creature's converted mana cost. So if you do a Llanowar Elf, it's going to be, the emerge cost is going to be 7. No green. If you do, I don't know, another the Eldrazi, you can essentially pay the 1 green to put this out. It's a 6/5, and when you cast it, not when it enters the battlefield, but when you cast it, you may destroy target artifact or enchantment. So it has a little bit of utility in it. So that was the creatures, specifically more so the elves and the Eldrazi that I put in here. I got a couple of utility cards for defense that I added in here, and then I got a couple of actual utility cards. Rabid Bite was a little bit of creature kill. Green doesn't have direct damage, but this is a good way to kill creatures. It doesn't have anything like black does, where you can just kill a creature. So target creature you control deals damage equal to its power to target creature you don't control. Tranquility, there are not a lot of enchantments in this deck, so you're safe to play this at any time if you're being overwhelmed by somebody who's playing like an Alayla deck. And Scour from Existence, which is a 7 to cast, just exile a permanent. So, and some of the upgrades you can do would be to recur some of these things with like a regrowth or something. I did not have the monetary ability to put it in here. Alright, and the rest of this is utility. So Elemental Bond is to help you draw cards. It's 1 green, 2 generic. Enchantment, whenever a creature with power 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. A lot of the creatures in here have a power 3, so that's good. Zhang Yangu Wildcrafter is a Planeswalker. It's 1 green, 2 generic, comes into play with 3 loyalty counters. It has a static ability of each creature you control with a +1/+1 counter. It has tap to add 1 mana of any color. And you can take 1 loyalty counter off. You can -1 it for putting a +1/+1 counter on target creature. So again, more +1/+1 counter fun. Mask of Avacyn is my budget version of like a Swiftfoot Boots, or an equipment that helps to give your creature some protection. It's 2 to cast. Quick creature gets +1/+2 and has hexproof, and its equip cost is 3. Pen and Blade is a 3 to cast artifact. It's an equipment. You can equip it for 4, and each equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each creature you control. It should make some things pretty beefy. If you can get this on there with, say, a Mask of Avacyn, and you can make it unblockable, your commander can hit for a lot. Ronus's Monument, 3 to cast. Green creatures, spells that you cast cost 1 less to cast. Obviously, that's really good. But whenever you cast a creature spell, and not successfully, by the way, target creature gets +2/+2 and gains trample until end of turn. Could not put that in there. My little techie thing in here was Dragon Throne of Tarkir. It's a 4 to cast equipment that equips for 3. Equipped creature has Defender, and I know that doesn't sound great, but it also has pay 2, tap it, and other creatures you control get +X, trample and +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the creature's power. So if you've got a really beefy thing out there, and say somebody decides to say, okay, I'm going to pacify it, you can put this on it, and still get its power out of it by giving all your other creatures +X/+X. Snake Umbra, another utility for helping you get cards into your hand. It's an enchantment aura. It's 1 green, 2 generic, enchants a creature, and the creature gets +1/+1 and has whenever this creature deals damage to an opponent, you may draw a card. Return of the Wild Speaker is 1 green, 4 generic. For an instant, you get to choose either draw cards equal to the greatest power among non-human creatures you control, or non-human creatures you control get +3/+3. That's important because that second one, while the first one seems great, the second one actually goes in conjunction with a couple things coming up. Shared Summons, 2 green, 3 generic. It's an instant that you can search your library for up to 2 creature cards with different names, reveal them and put them in your hand, and then shuffle your library so you can go ahead and grab the 2 things you want, like Eldrazi. This is where they combine. So the Return of the Wild Speaker can give +3/+3. Overcome is 2 green, 3 generic. Creatures you control get +2/+2 and trample until end of turn. And then Overrun is 3 green, 2 generic, and creatures you control get +3/+3 and trample until end of turn. So you can use them together to really buff your creatures. So we're really doing Stompy style here. And last but not least is Colossification. I wanted to have a fun card in here. So it's 2 green, 5 generic, and yeah, it sounds expensive, but this deck's going to be able to generate a lot of mana. It enchants a creature, and when it enters the battlefield, tap enchanted creature, and the enchanted creature gets +20/+20. You have to have a Timmy card in some of these budget decks. So, anyway, so that was the budget version of a commander deck, mono green Marwyn the Nurturer. This is my first Blues budget brews. Again, these decks are going to be for sale. I'm going to put a price tag on them. If you look up the price on when I use MTG Goldfish and I put the deck list up, it comes up as TCG low. The problem with TCG low is that when it gives you that price, it can give you damaged cards prices, and most of these cards are pretty much near mint, so that's kind of a false read when you read it. So right now you'll read that the deck cost, as of taping this, was $45, but that included the basic lands for some reason coming up as $10 of the budget. I don't know why that did. I don't include basic lands in the price. They are just lands to me. So I'm putting a price tag of these as $40 plus shipping, and usually the shipping is about $4 or $5 depending on where you live. And these are available for sale. This is the first one I'm doing. I'm going to be doing Tatiova, which is going to be a lands deck. I'm thinking of doing Ishkana, which is green-black spiders. I don't know yet exactly how long it's going to take me to get them together. But this one came to me the other day. I had to make it. A couple ways you can contact me. So, my email address is dschwartz, that's schwartz1979 @gmail.com. If you need to get a hold of me, go ahead and use that. If you want to go to the Facebook page, it's Blue Bears Games on Facebook. There is a link there to go ahead and contact me. You can put a comment here and give me your contact information in the comments in the section below. And I don't think there's any other way to do it. I'm sure there are, but those are the ways that I'd prefer it. So, any questions, comments, or concerns, any feedback or anything like that you have, you can also go ahead and either put it in the comments below, or you can go ahead and contact me directly, and we can, you can tell me what you want to tell me. There are ways to upgrade this deck, and I do have some cards that you can upgrade it with. If you would like to go over options of upgrading a little bit with some more expensive cards, we can discuss that any way you want as well. So, that is that. That is my first Blues budget brews. Decks that are for sale to help people out if you're just starting out or if you just need something to build off of. Thank you for watching. Please do me the favor, like the video, subscribe to the channel. I'm going to be putting more of these up that are going to be A, for sale, and B, to help you get an idea of a deck that you may want to build. And, comment in the section below for anything that you want to talk about. So that is Blues Budget Brews, Marwyn the Nurturer. Thank you for watching and have a good one.